Welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, where we make money human. Here, we eliminate shame from the financial experience and drive money conversations to be holistic and human first. I'm your host, Nate Astle, and welcome to Money Minus Shame. Welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast, sponsored by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. I am your host, Nate Astle, and I am here with Tyrone White, and we are talking a little bit about families today and all the different dynamics that happen between generations, but also what we can do to hopefully make these kinds of money conversations go better and more smoothly. Families and money is something that all of us deal with on some level. All of us have family relationships that are complicated. It's confusing to work through different issues, and money is something that is part of pretty much all of it. I do think it's important that as we're talking about family relationships, please, audience, please know that there is no right or wrong way to do family relationships and money. There's a whole lot of different right ways to do it. And we just want to talk about maybe some different aspects of specific relationships and how specific relationships might change over time.
I'm interested to know more about what are some money problems that happen when you're an adult and you have young children. What are some money problems that you see in those dynamics?
It's definitely something that I think a lot of young parents struggle with because they want to be good parents, they want to do right by their kids, but they don't always know, how do I teach money to my kids in a way that they understand. There's a whole lot of different resources out there on teaching your kids the basics of budgeting or the basics of investments or the basics of XYZ topic. Really what I think it comes down to, though, is how comfortable am I with the topic? Because a lot of times we have our own feelings, our own worries. It's not just what we say to our kids, it's what they hear. And so if they see that we are talking to them about some subject, but we're super uncomfortable, or maybe we don't like talking about the subject, these are messages that kids pick up too. So one of the best things you can do as a parent is kind of work on some of your own stuff, work on some of your own issues you might have with money, but also potentially see your own professional, whatever you need to, so that when you have those conversations, it's comfortable, it's relaxing, you feel safe talking about it, they feel safe listening to it. It's just like having sex talks with your kids or educating them about other important things. It needs to feel comfortable and natural. And quite honestly, you need to be talking about money or sex or any other topic just as much as you would, what'd you do today, how was school. We don't need to make certain topics off limits.
Something I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to count his money. Everything was in cash. He used to have his wallet and he used to count his cash. And even from when I was a baby, my parents told me I was always fascinated by money. I always wanted to see what money looked like. And so when I would watch him count his money, he would say to me all the time, he'd go, "Why are you looking at my money? Why are you staring at my money?" He would say it in a joking way, but a part of me kind of knew he was serious at the same time. So it gave me the message as a kid that money was something that you didn't really talk about, you didn't show to other people. That was kind of the message I was getting from him, is that that's something really we shouldn't be sharing with other people.
Super, super common. I had the same message. I remember I was maybe 6 or 7 and I asked how much my dad made just because I was curious. And my dad told me because he didn't think it was a big deal, but my mom did. She was like, "Don't tell him that. He's going to now go and tell all of his friends." And I remember feeling a little hurt and sad that mom didn't trust me with the information. Now, would I probably have gone and told all my friends? Yeah, probably, because I was a kid. But the point is I do remember that feeling of like, okay, this is supposed to be like a secret or like a hush-hush thing. And I think these stories, Tyrone, like, it's not just what your dad said, but it's probably how he said it too.
Yeah.
And like, we learn just as much about how our parents say things as what they say itself.
Do you have any examples, like when you work with clients, has this popped up at all where maybe the adults feel that they're not teaching their kids certain skills, or that they maybe talk about money in front of them and maybe their kids are picking up the wrong message?
I think it's important to remember that you are not going to do this perfectly. That can't be the expectation. You can be the most financially savvy person in the world, but that doesn't mean that you're going to teach your children perfectly about anything. The expectation can't be that my financial skills are at such a level that I never make mistakes or forget things. I think really what it comes down to is, can I teach the basics? Things cost money. I do think this is an important thing to talk with kids about, is that money does have value in specific scenarios, right? Like if I need to have food, money often is a prerequisite to that. If I want to have a house or a place to be, if I want to be able to buy toys, I need to have money because things cost money. That is something that kids learn eventually just through life. But I think what we don't want to do, and unfortunately, a lot of parents don't realize that they're doing this in the moment, is overemphasize money by other behaviors. So, for example, I remember my dad worked a lot. He was very career driven and he had other involvements with our church growing up and other volunteer things he did with Boy Scouts. And he was busy all the time. And I remember feeling like, how come money is so important that I'm missing out, right? I'm missing out on time with him, or I'm missing out on other things. And I think that's kind of a message that I'm sure my dad didn't intend to send. I don't blame him for it. But those are the other messages we need to pay attention to. Am I overemphasizing money? Am I saying that money is going to solve all of my problems? Because that's not exactly true either. Another kind of starting point just to consider when you think about, what do I need to teach my kids about money? I would argue there's probably 3 or 4 things that would be a good thing to consider. One, values. Money is a part of our day-to-day life, but if we can understand what our values are, it helps us make financial decisions. If part of our family values is vacations, or part of our family values is safety or stability or preparing for retirement, when I understand what my values are, it helps me when I'm trying to actually make a financial choice. Do I decide to buy this toy, this bicycle, this car, whatever age range they're in? Well, what do our values say? Helping kids understand what values are, maybe certainly what your family values might be, but quite honestly, kids are going to have their own personal values too. So helping kids explore that and helping them understand decision making based on values is going to be a really important thing for success in the long run. As far as other financial things to explore and explain to them, a couple that I would encourage. One, I do think budgeting is an important thing to talk about. Budgeting doesn't necessarily need to be Excel sheets or getting your pen and paper out, but just help them see that if I am prepared for what expenses I'm planning on making, and I'm prepared for the expenses I'm not currently planning on making, I won't have to go into debt, or I will likely struggle less. Debt is another one, including credit cards, just basics of how they work. How does interest work? And then I think the last thing would be, you don't have to be an investment expert, but just explaining the basic idea of, if I put money away now, that money will be worth more in the future, is a idea that I think most people can understand on some level. And then as they grow up, maybe when they get their first job or something, then you can start talking about, there's 401ks, there's checking accounts, there's savings account. All of these things can be explored over time.
I want to go back to some of the message you got, like working a lot and having to work. Money shows that money's more important than maybe spend time with your family. Not that they say that, but you picked up as a kid. I want to touch on that for a minute, because do you think that little boys and little girls get different messages about money growing up?
Absolutely. And there's actually quite a bit of research on this around gender socialization. So basically, what gender I am as a kid can really define what I'm exposed to. Silly example, like little boys play with action figures and little girls play with dolls. That used to be much more stereotypical. When it comes to money and the messages that we send boys versus girls, when it comes to money importance, is really interesting. We tend to, and I'm talking broad strokes, every family is going to look different. We tend to emphasize the importance of earning money for boys, and we tend to emphasize the importance of saving money for girls. And it's, if you think about it, it's based in those traditional gender stereotypes or gender roles where the man is working outside of the home, he makes the money, and then the woman is in charge of home management and making sure that the money is saved and used appropriately for the household. And those messages, again, we don't have to explicitly sit our children down and say, "Hello, son, did you know you're supposed to make money?" Like, it's not always that clear. It's just how we treat certain things. Do we use certain language or certain gendered pronouns when we're talking about an earner? Do we use certain language around what it means to save, what it means to manage things? There's a lot to it, and I definitely want parents listening to this, please know you don't have to be perfect at this, but frequency of conversation is important. This isn't just I sit down and I have the money talk with my kids once and then they know about money. This is something to expose them to often, because what we want is we want them to ask questions. We want them to feel safe enough to ask questions with you so that they're getting good information. I promise your sons will be in a locker room someday and someone's going to be talking about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And if they have no idea what these things are, they're going to make their own choices, sometimes without you knowing or consenting to it. And the more that you're able to explain to them, the better informed or prepared they'll be for when they have to make those financial choices.
So I actually want to shift gears and talk about now these kids get these messages, they grow up, now they're adults, and now we're seeing inflation, a lot, many things. Housing's more expensive now. I think last time I checked some statistics, it was like housing now is 3 to 4 times more expensive than previous generations, particularly baby boomers. Are we seeing any problems with possibly adult children now staying at home with their parents?
Yeah. And this has been a phenomenon for a decade or more, really since the 2008 crash. There's always been a subset of children that stay with their parents. Even just culturally, we got to acknowledge that the idea of just launching our kids at 18 and they go off and live their lives and they never come home, that's really kind of a Western idea. Like lots of other cultures around the world, that it's expected that the children do stay home, take care of the family, and it's much more communal or community based. But I think because our culture is set up the way it is, when there are adult children living in a home, there can be a lot of shame, there can be a lot of internalized roles about what this means for me to be living at my parents' house, what this means for my kid to be living at my house. Does this mean that I failed as a parent? Does this mean that I failed as a child? There's a lot of shame that can come up in these kinds of dynamics. So it's important we talk about what to expect, but also what can we do to prevent some complications.
I don't know if you have one, but do you have any stories or any situations where you work with clients, then this has happened where there's some conflict between adult children staying at home with their parents?
Several stories, actually. One case recently, really awesome older couple. They're probably in their mid 60s. They're about retirement age, and they have a daughter who has a mental illness. And unfortunately, it's not one of those mental illnesses that a lot of people see or recognize. And because of that, there's a lot of stigma around, like, oh, is the child just being lazy? But the parents have decided, no, we are going to financially support our daughter. It causes a lot of stress because, on one hand, both of them are in agreement that this was something they wanted to do and thought was important. This was within their values. But they also feel a lot of pressure from friends and just other people in their kind of circle around, well, why are you still supporting her? She needs to learn to fly on her own. What is she going to do when you two pass on? There's just a lot of judgment around that process. Quite frankly, they also had their own judgment on, why isn't she trying to do more? What is she going to do when we pass away? And it was messy. So a lot of the work that we did together in financial therapy was identifying what their values were, so that when they were feeling pressured or when they were feeling confused about what they should do, let's go back to our values. What do we actually care about? What is most important to us? Is what's most important to us that we're able to financially support her because we can and because we love her and we want her to be set up for success? Or are our values that she learns some independence? Starting with values is always a really good starting place. We also worked on how do we set boundaries. Boundaries is a huge, huge part of any kind of family dynamic where every party, okay, whether it's the children or the parents, everyone needs to know what to expect. And if we aren't super clear about what our expectations are, about what our plan is, what we are in alignment on, it is a breeding ground for resentment. The child resents the parents resent the child, and this rupture just expands. And this is where money stuff in families can really hurt. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but destroy a lot of families is when we're not being clear about what we need or what we expect. When it's clear, we might not always like everything, but clear is kind. That's one of my favorite Brene Brown quotes is clear is kind. So the more clarity around money, the more clarity around what support you're willing to give, what support you're not willing to give, the better.
Yeah. A lot of situations that I see is when parents are trying to take care of adult children financially and they
Mhm.
can't afford it. I see a lot of the stress pile up because that they feel responsible. I've heard parents say that they feel responsible because that's their kid and they feel like it must be something they did for them to be in that situation. Maybe they didn't.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of guilt involved. And then they try to take on the adult children's financial responsibility, but they can't afford it. And then they get more and more into debt,
Mhm.
and it kind of builds this resentment towards the kids as well, even though they feel like they're responsible for them. It's really tough.
It is. It's super tough. It's also incredibly common. That's something we can myth bust real quick is that this is something only a few people are dealing with. This is incredibly common where adult children are struggling. There's a lot of economic factors that have nothing to do with the adult children, but parents feel this responsibility to take care of them and at their own detriment. And it's not always debt. It can be I'm not putting in as much or anything into my retirement. And so maybe I'm not going into debt for my kids, or maybe I am, but I'm certainly postponing other financial priorities I might have. It's super common. And it's another thing where if we aren't clear about what our expectations are, it can lead to a lot of resentment. If you have adult children that you're financially supporting, or if you're considering financially supporting adult children, the clearer you can be about what you expect, the better. And so, what I encourage people to do, we actually have a worksheet on our website at the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute that you can download for free called Setting Money Boundaries. It walks you through a process of identifying what will I and won't I accept. Maybe I'm okay with the child living at my house for a certain amount of time rent free, or maybe I'm okay with them coming, they can pay a small rent. But maybe I have stipulations or contingencies like you need to be actively applying for jobs, or you need to have a job, or maybe I expect you to pay for some of the groceries. All of these are things that you need to figure out what am I comfortable with and what am I not comfortable with. This is inherently this emotional experience because I might have these beliefs around what it means about me as a parent to have adult children struggling with this. And I would really encourage some compassion there. There are probably a million different reasons why your kid is in the position that they are, why you're in the position that you are. Some of them might have to do with your own choices or the child's choices, but there's probably a lot that don't have anything to do with either of you. The economy, the job opportunities in your child's field, stuff that has nothing to do with either of you. So, as much as you can, try to be kind and try to be clear about what your expectations are. If you're not going to understand everything that around, oh, we didn't think about this, that's okay. Have frequent follow ups. Maybe we have this agreement where you come back home or I pay your rent for X amount of time, but have regular talks. The more regular talks you're having, there's just a whole lot of prevention. I think regular talks prevents a lot of heartache.
Another thing I'm starting to see quite a bit is adults becoming concerned about the parents. That's another thing that I see with clients. Now it could be the parents are living with them or they're helping out financially, or sometimes they're just concerned about their well being and their future because their parents are not saving money and they know that. So they're concerned what type of responsibility or what type of role should they take as they age. Have you seen that at all working with some of your clients?
Absolutely. We often call it the sandwich generation, where I am supporting both a child and a parent. So I'm in a sandwich. That's also very common. And quite frankly, it's become an expectation that this is just part of the growing up process. If my parents live to old age, I will have to deal with their caregiving. And I don't know if that's healthy. I think that's a decision that needs to be made intentionally rather than just because that's the cultural expectation. I had a recent case where the son, who was in his 40s, had parents that were in their late 60s, early 70s, and mom had been retired for a while. Dad had his own business, and parents just never really stopped their spending. Like they never really slowed down. And I think the parents in this case really struggled with the idea of retirement and needing to cut back. And so the son was worried because if they run out of money, I don't know if I'm going to have money to put them in a home. I don't think I have space in my home to take care of them, and I'm not sure that I want to. And I think that's totally fair. And so there's this really complicated dynamic where parents need to make some changes, but hearing it from your kid is hard. I think you had a name for this, Tyrone. What did you
Oh
call it?
yeah, it's something I heard as diaper syndrome. Is that if you change somebody's diapers, you don't want to get their opinion. So yeah, if you change the diaper, you're not trying to hear anything they're trying to say. Yeah.
It's funny, but it's very real. Like it's
Yeah.
hearing from your kid like, "Hey, I don't think you're financially like I'm worried." And man, it's a big pride pill to swallow. And it's really important to have these kinds of conversations that are safe and adult because they're not in diapers anymore. They're in their 30s or 40s or whatever. Or they're adults, and that's a really tough, complicated place to be. Again, this is where the boundaries though comes in is if you're the child and you have adult parents that you are either giving care to, paying some for something, or are afraid that that's going to happen, it would be really important to broach the conversation earlier rather than later. It's hard though.
I was just gonna say that I've seen even culture comes into play. Sometimes people marry and they love each other and they're both adults and they marry, but one person's culture they take care of their older parents, so they just kind of expect it. The other person's like, no, that's not how I see it. And then there's conflict with that. I had worked with a couple where the husband was kind of like, hey, we can't have any say in their finances moving forward. Then we're not going to take care of them in the future. They're not going to listen to us. Then we're not going to take care of it. And then the wife was kind of like, this is how our culture is. We take care of the older generation. So there's a lot of conflict around there. And then we're trying to talk about finances in the future. And it definitely sometimes complicates things when you have two different values. Like you talked about, there's different values there. So it's almost like you got to get on the same page about the values.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that's another really important part of this is if you're supporting adult parents, you may be partnered and your partner might not have the same beliefs or expectations that you do. And so now you're in this place of being pulled in a lot of different directions. Again, this is more common than we realize. This is actually incredibly common. The more that you can be clear, and also the more that you can identify power dynamics, just because when you're a small child, your parents inherently have more power. They get to decide more as an adult than you do as a child. And that's, for the most part, safe. That's usually a pretty good thing. But now we're both adults. And I know that you have your own decision making, but I am in a different place than what I was when I was in diapers. So, talking about what are the power dynamics that might be influencing this decision or these decisions? Is one of us essentially pulling rank either by age or pulling rank because, well, you don't get to choose because I'm the one with the money? I think power imbalances can cause quite a bit of conflict. So, open and honest conversations, it's really not very revolutionary, but turns out communication is a pretty big balm of healing.
And another thing I want to talk about because family and money problems. Another thing I see when I work with clients pretty often is when there's a death in the family and there's inheritance, it's property, homes. sometimes the parents leave it in two kids' names, three kids' names, and they have different opinions on how they want to handle the property. Some want to keep it, some want to sell it. Have you dealt with that at all or
Yeah.
seen any issues?
Yeah. And the funny thing about that is money just becomes a language by which we view all of our normal family dynamics. And so when there's these inheritance issues, and again, not everyone has inheritance to divvy up, but even if it's not, I'm getting money, maybe I have to take care of financial situation of my parent. Maybe I don't have a great relationship with my parent. Maybe my relationship is complicated. It's really, really, really tough. If you can, the more preventative you can be around setting up estate plans early, the less complicated it is. I do remember when my grandma passed away on my mom's side, my mom and her six siblings had to take care of the property they left behind, had to take care of some extra land. There are family heirlooms and just stuff that needed to get taken care of. There's what do we do with the food that's in the fridge? There are so many decisions that need to get made in that situation, and it's exhausting. The more that you can be intentional and preventative as the parent to reduce some of that conflict, I do think the better. If you're a child and that's the position that you're in and you're having to take care of all this stuff, first step, give yourself a couple of breaths. Be gracious with yourself. You are going through a pretty intense grieving process, and grief shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up in sadness, shows up in fear, shows up in anger. And those are very valid feelings that might distort the way you're experiencing these financial decisions. And what I mean by that is it's really easy to be reactionary, to be like, screw it, I'm tear down the house because I can't deal with it. That's understandable. And let's try to slow down just a little bit. As much as you can, try to make the process simple, but also don't feel rushed. Don't feel like you have to figure it all out right now or within the next week or the next month. I know that that might not be possible and there might need to be some kind of quick decisions that get made, but as much as you can, give yourself space to figure all this out. Again, if you have siblings or things where there's now sibling dynamic that we have to deal with, try to avoid those power imbalances. Very common for the oldest to be the one that feels like they have to take charge, or maybe I'm the person that mom or dad or whoever put in charge. I'm the executor of the will. That doesn't mean that you necessarily need to call all the shots and be the general and direct things. We need to have honest, open communication, be clear about what it is you need, and as much as you can, give yourself some space, because this is complicated and it's going to be complicated, and that's okay.
I know a lot of us would like to try to handle everything on our own, but what are some signs or some things we could look for that would indicate that we need to go seek professional help?
One, if you are too overwhelmed that it is interfering with your functioning, like I'm not able to talk to my kids or my parents because it's just too hard, definitely consider it then. If you are in the position where there's an estate or someone passes away or something, it's very, very important to consider getting some kind of legal support. Because what happens if you don't have legal support or things aren't clear about who gets what tends to happen is it just gets turned over to your state. And the state is a lot less forgiving about where things go. So legal support is going to be important. If you're struggling, though, with conflict in a family dynamic, very, very normal. And it can be important to get some kind of family therapist if your family is willing to go. But even if your family isn't willing to engage in a family financial therapy process, at least make sure that you're getting your own support here. Make sure that you have your own therapist or mediator, someone that can help validate you, someone who can help you regulate emotionally so that you're making decisions that align with your values rather than reacting to emotions you might just be having right now.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different aspects to family problems, a lot of things that you go over with different generations. There's young children to consider, there's adult children, maybe your parents. It sounds like there's a lot that can happen in a family dynamic.
Of course, families are inherently complicated. And so I think if there's nothing else people get from today is no matter where you are in the family tree and no matter really what the financial situation that's happening, the more that you can be clear about what you need or expect out of a situation and the more that you can observe power dynamics, I think those are kind of the big two things to process, potentially get extra support around. Because if you can figure those two things out, a lot of the communication and at least the decision making gets easier. I'm glad that we got to talk about this today. And so, for all you future listeners, please check in next time as we continue to take the shame out of money, and we will see you there. Thanks for listening to the Money Minus Shame podcast, powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for mental health services or financial advice. This is a cafeteria where you can take what you like and leave the rest. Make sure to like and subscribe so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. And if you like what you hear, let us know. Reach out at money-shame@gmail.com or send us a DM with thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like to see us cover. Take care of yourself out there, and we'll see you next time.